Talia had always imagined marriage as something born out of love. Not signatures, not contracts. But love, the kind that warmed the heart on quiet nights and made two people feel less alone in a restless world. Yet as she stood in the grand hallway of her new home, staring at the gold band circling her finger, she felt nothing but emptiness. The silence between her and Tobias was deafening, filled with all the things they never said, all the things they didn't want to feel. Their union wasn't one of choice. It was strategy, a merger between two powerful families who believed business could be sealed tighter through blood than through ink. Tobias, cold and efficient, had accepted the arrangement out of duty. Talia, still grieving the man she thought she'd spend forever with, had accepted because she no longer had the strength to fight against life's cruel currents. Jason's name still echoed in her chest like a prayer half forgotten. His laughter, his warmth, gone in an instant, leaving behind the ghost of what could have been. And now, in this unfamiliar mansion, she felt haunted. Not by spirits, but by memories that refused to die. Tobias was no stranger to silence either. He spent most of his days locked in his study, surrounded by deals, deadlines, and distractions. Anything to keep him from noticing how his wife's eyes seemed fixed on something he could never see. He told himself it didn't matter, that their marriage was an obligation, nothing more. But sometimes, in the quiet of early morning, he'd glance at her across the breakfast table and wonder why her sadness felt heavier than his own. They lived like strangers sharing a home built for love. Separate rooms. Separate routines. Separate lives tied together by the thin thread of duty. But even the coldest hearts begin to thaw when brushed too often by the warmth of another. It started small. A forgotten umbrella on a rainy night. Tobias returning home late to find Talia asleep on the couch, a book slipping from her hand. He covered her with a blanket, hesitating for just a second longer than necessary, watching the faint rise and fall of her chest. Something unfamiliar stirred in him, a tenderness he had no name for. Talia began to notice things, too. The way Tobias's voice softened when he spoke to the staff. The quiet sighs he released when he thought no one was listening. The exhaustion in his eyes that didn't come from work alone. For the first time, she saw not a businessman, but a man trying to live up to everyone's expectations, including his own. And for a fleeting moment, she pitied him, then hated herself for it. Weeks turned into months. Their routines began to overlap. Shared breakfasts. Muted conversations. Awkward silences that slowly evolved into hesitant exchanges. She'd comment on the weather. He'd ask if she needed anything from the city. Nothing grand, but enough to stitch tiny threads between them. One evening, as the rain poured against the windows, the power went out. Tobias found Talia in the living room, her hands trembling around a candle. The flickering light painted her face in soft gold, and for the first time, she looked alive, fragile, yes, but real. "You're afraid of the dark?" he asked gently. She shook her head, forcing a small laugh. "Just memories." He hesitated before speaking again. "Of him?" Her silence was answer enough. Tobias's jaw tightened, jealousy flickering beneath the surface. He wanted to tell her he understood, but the words got lost between pride and pain. Instead, he sat across from her, the candlelight dancing between them like a secret. "He must have been a good man," Tobias finally said. "He was," she whispered. "And I wasn't ready to lose him." Something in her voice cracked, and for the first time, Tobias didn't feel anger, he felt sorrow. Not for Jason, but for her. For the way she carried grief like a second skin. He wanted to take it from her, even if just for a night. From that evening on, something shifted. The air between them grew softer. They didn't speak much, but their silences became less painful. Tobias started to linger a little longer at breakfast. Talia began to wait up for him at night. There were small smiles, half-hearted jokes, accidental touches that lingered too long. One morning, she found a bouquet of lilies on the table. No note, just flowers, her favorite. She hadn't told him that. She didn't need to. And yet, for every inch they grew closer, guilt stood in the way. She still wore Jason's pendant beneath her blouse, a quiet reminder of the love she'd buried. Tobias noticed it once, the glint of gold near her collarbone, and something dark twisted inside him. Jealousy. Insecurity. The cruel thought that no matter how close she stood, her heart still belonged to a ghost. That night, his temper broke. "Do you ever think about the living?" he asked bitterly. She looked at him, startled. "What are you talking about? You mourn a man who's gone, but what about the one standing right in front of you?" Her eyes glistened with hurt. "You don't understand." "Then make me," he snapped. "Because I'm tired of living with someone who can't even see me." The words echoed through the house like thunder. Talia's hands shook as she set down her glass. "You think this is easy? You think I can just erase the man I loved?" "I'm not asking you to erase him," Tobias said quietly, his voice breaking. "I'm asking you to let me in." Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she said nothing. He left the room, and the silence that followed was louder than any argument. For days, they avoided each other. The house grew cold again, filled with unsaid apologies. Tobias regretted his words, but pride kept him still. Talia wanted to explain, but guilt chained her voice. Until one evening, she found him in Jason's old study, the one room she never entered. Tobias stood there, holding a framed photo of Jason. "I didn't mean to invade your space," he said softly. "I just wanted to understand what you lost." She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "You can't understand. He was my home." Tobias turned to her, eyes glistening. "And what if I could be one too?" Something inside her broke, not from pain, but from release. She walked closer, her tears falling freely now. "I don't know how to stop missing him," she whispered. "Then don't," he said. "Just don't let it stop you from feeling alive again." For the first time, she saw him clearly, not as her husband by obligation, but as a man standing in front of her, offering something fragile and real. Her hand trembled as she reached for him. He didn't move, didn't speak, just let her take that step. The kiss that followed wasn't about passion, it was about permission, to grieve, to forgive, to begin again. It was soft and trembling, the kind that says I see your scars, and I'm not afraid of them. From that night, the house began to feel different. Brighter. Lived in. Tobias laughed more, Talia smiled again. They learned to cook together, to argue without walls, to sit in silence without drowning in it. Slowly, the ghost of Jason became less of a shadow and more of a memory, cherished, but no longer in control. Months passed. The seasons changed. One morning, Tobias found her standing by the garden, sunlight tracing her hair like gold. She looked at peace. He walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Do you still think of him?" he asked quietly. "Sometimes," she said. "But it doesn't hurt like it used to." "And me?" She smiled softly. "You remind me that love doesn't die. It just changes shape." He pressed a kiss to her temple, closing his eyes. For the first time, Tobias felt what he'd never dared to hope for, contentment. They had both been broken, but somehow, in the wreckage, they had built something new. Love hadn't come the way either of them expected. It didn't arrive with fireworks or certainty. It crept in quietly, patient and persistent, until even their scars became beautiful. And as the morning sun rose over their home, Talia whispered to herself, "Maybe ghosts don't haunt us to torment us. Maybe they stay just long enough to guide us toward the ones who can heal us." Tobias tightened his embrace, and she leaned into him. For once, the silence between them wasn't empty. It was peace, the kind that comes after the storm. They had been strangers bound by duty, haunted by loss. But in the end, they found what neither had expected. Not perfection. Not erasure. Just love, fragile, flawed, and beautifully alive. Talia had begun to laugh again. It startled the maids at first, the way her laughter drifted through the halls like a melody they hadn't heard in months. Tobias would pause in his study, smiling to himself without realizing it. That sound, light, unguarded, was proof that something in her had finally begun to heal. But healing rarely comes without trials. The families that bound them together by contract began to notice the change too. At dinners and board meetings, whispers circulated. Some saw their closeness as weakness. Some worried love would distract Tobias from the empire he was meant to lead. His father, a man who measured affection by profit margins, watched Tobias with quiet disapproval. "You're losing focus," his father warned one night. The merger was meant to stabilize, not sentimentalize. "Remember that." Tobias clenched his jaw. "I remember everything. Including the fact that I'm human." "Humans make mistakes," his father replied coldly. "And love is the biggest one." The words cut deeper than Tobias cared to admit. But when he returned home and found Talia waiting in the garden with tea and that soft, hesitant smile, he knew the old man was wrong. Love wasn't a mistake, indifference was. Talia sensed the tension but didn't press. She'd learned that Tobias spoke most when he was quiet, in the way his fingers brushed hers when handing her a cup, or in the way he lingered at the door before leaving each morning. Their love was a language built slowly, word by word, until silence itself felt like understanding. One evening, they hosted a charity event, their first public appearance as a couple. Cameras flashed, reporters swarmed. Talia wore a sapphire gown that shimmered like moonlight, and Tobias couldn't take his eyes off her. When she smiled at him for the cameras, he forgot for a moment that any of this had begun as duty. But amid the glitz and the noise, Talia overheard a whisper, cruel, careless. "That's the widow who married her dead fiancé's rival, isn't she?" The words pierced her composure. She excused herself, retreating to a quiet corridor where the laughter couldn't reach. Her chest tightened, guilt, always waiting, rose like a tide. Tobias found her minutes later, eyes glistening. "They don't know you," he said softly. "They don't have to," she replied, voice trembling. "They're right. I did marry you because I had no choice." He stepped closer. "But you stayed because you wanted to." Her breath hitched. "And that scares me more than anything." He reached for her hand, steady and warm. "Then let me be the one thing you don't have to be afraid of." That night, after the guests had gone and the lights dimmed, Talia lay awake listening to the rain. Tobias stirred beside her, turning toward her in the dark. She didn't speak, but he sensed her unease. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. She took a moment before answering. "Sometimes I think love isn't about choosing someone. It's about surviving them." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Then maybe we're learning to survive each other." Her lips curved faintly. For once, she didn't feel haunted. She felt human. Days became weeks, and their connection deepened in quiet, unremarkable ways, shared coffee in the morning, evening walks through the orchard, the comfort of knowing someone would be there at the end of the day. But love, no matter how fragile, is always tested. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic, Talia found a sealed envelope tucked inside an old box, Jason's handwriting, unmistakable. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, a letter dated a week before his death. "My Talia," it began, "if you're reading this, it means life had other plans. Promise me you'll keep living. Promise me you'll find happiness, even if it isn't with me." Tears blurred the ink. Tobias found her there hours later, the letter clutched to her chest. "He wrote to me," she whispered. "He wanted me to move on." Tobias knelt beside her, voice soft. "Then maybe it's time to let him rest." Her eyes lifted to his. "I think he already has." That night, Talia placed the letter in a wooden box and buried it beneath the old oak in their garden. Tobias watched from the window, giving her the space to say goodbye. When she returned, her eyes were swollen but clear. "It hurts," she said, "but it feels right." He took her hand. That's what healing is supposed to feel like. Their love blossomed after that, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet certainty of two people who had seen each other's worst and still stayed. Yet, peace has its enemies. Tobias's father soon discovered that Tobias had diverted company funds to support an orphanage Talia had founded in Jason's memory. Furious, he confronted his son. "You're letting her manipulate you," he spat. "She's turned you into a sentimental fool." Tobias stood firm. "If compassion makes me weak, then I never want to be strong. You're throwing away everything I built." "No," Tobias said calmly. "I'm building something better." He left the office that day knowing he'd crossed a line that could never be undone. But when he saw Talia waiting for him at home, her smile weary yet radiant, he knew he'd made the right choice. That night, they sat together by the fire, their hands intertwined. "Are you sure you're not angry?" she asked. "For what?" "For making you choose." He shook his head. "You didn't make me. Love did." The flames flickered between them, soft and golden. Tobias leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. "I used to think love was a distraction," he murmured. "Now I think it's the only thing that's ever made me pay attention." She smiled, tears catching the firelight. "Then maybe we're both learning." Months later, Talia's orphanage opened its doors. Tobias stood beside her as children laughed and ran through the garden. Reporters captured the moment, but all he could see was her, the way joy had returned to her face, how her laughter no longer carried the weight of grief. That evening, as they walked home under a lavender sky, Talia looked up at him. "Do you ever think about the future?" He chuckled. "Only when it includes you." She stopped walking, her heart swelling. "You mean that?" "More than I've meant anything in my life." She kissed him then, slow, deliberate, and full of everything words could never say. The years that followed were not without struggle. There were arguments, misunderstandings, and moments when their old fears resurfaced. Tobias's jealousy would sometimes reappear in subtle ways, and Talia's memories of Jason would occasionally cloud her heart. But they learned, again and again, to choose each other despite it all. One winter night, a storm knocked out the power again, just like the one from their early days. Talia lit a candle, smiling at the memory. "Déjà vu," Tobias said. "Except this time, I'm not afraid." He smiled, pulling her close. "Good. Because I'll always be here in the dark with you." They sat together, the candlelight flickering across their faces. She looked at him, older now, wiser, softer. "Do you ever miss who we were before all this?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "Sometimes. But then I look at you, and I realize that everything we went through made this moment possible. Every heartbreak. Every mistake." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Then maybe that's what love really is, not forgetting the pain, but finding someone who makes it worth remembering." The storm raged outside, but inside there was warmth, laughter, and peace. The ghosts of their past had not vanished, they had simply learned to live alongside them. Years later, under that same oak tree where Talia had buried Jason's letter, Tobias placed a new plaque, "For every love that teaches us how to love again." Talia watched him, her eyes shining. He would have liked that. "I think he already does," Tobias said softly. The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying with it the faint echo of closure. As they stood together beneath the tree, Talia reached for his hand. "Do you think we ever stop being haunted?" Tobias smiled gently. "No. But maybe being haunted just means we've loved deeply enough to be remembered." She leaned into him, her heart full, her grief finally at peace. In the years that followed, their love became a quiet legacy. They grew older together, built a home filled with laughter and forgiveness. People often said they looked inseparable, as if they had been born to find each other all along. And perhaps they were. Because sometimes, life doesn't give us the love we expect. It gives us the love we need, the one that stays after the storm, the one that reminds us we are still capable of feeling, of hoping, of beginning again. As the sun set over their garden, Tobias brushed a kiss against Talia's forehead and whispered, "You saved me." She smiled softly. "No, Tobias. We saved each other." The world outside moved on, seasons changing, people forgetting. But inside their little world, love remained. Not perfect. Not endless. Just real. And maybe that was enough. And as the light began to fade, the world around them seemed to hush, as though even the wind wanted to listen to their hearts. The years ahead would still hold challenges, quiet storms, and memories that sometimes ached in silence. But this time, they would face them together. Because love, real love, isn't about erasing the past. It's about finding someone who helps you live beyond it. And in that garden where sorrow once bloomed, something new now flourished, hope. If you've ever loved, lost, or learned to love again, let this story remind you that every ending carries the seed of a new beginning. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more timeless love stories, and share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Because sometimes, the greatest love stories are the ones that rise from the ashes of heartbreak.